Okay, let's say you're like one of the most successful demon hunters in the world. Then you might think that there was no spirit that you couldn't handle. That's exactly what the Warrens thought until they found a case that changed their lives forever, and this is the story of the most powerful demon that they ever encountered. Many years ago, a family in England began to experience terrifying attacks like late in the middle of the night, but this time even the experts might not make it out alive. So we're here to break down the mistakes made, what you should do, and how to beat the demon Valak in The Conjuring 2. This investigation is about to turn deadly. So all the way back in 1976 at a house in the quiet town of Amityville, New York. In a dining room, we find the family nervously gathered around a table along with paranormal experts Ed and Lorraine Warren, who've been sent by the church to confirm that this place is haunted. 1 year earlier, the young man who lived there brutally wiped out his entire family in the middle of the night, claiming that he was possessed by a demonic spirit. Yeah, sure, buddy. As the others watch Lorraine entering a deep state of concentration, she starts reliving the events from the killer's perspective. She notices the ghost of a little boy and chases after him as he disappears down the steps, but that right there was her biggest mistake. Realizing that she's in trouble, her husband Ed tries to wake her up, but Lorraine insists on staying in the vision. Following the kid down to the basement, another vision of the family's ghosts point her towards an old mirror, and looking in the reflection, she's kinda horrified when the spirit of a demonic nun appears right behind her. All of a sudden, the nun grabs her by the throat, showing the woman a vision of her husband as he's brutally impaired by a wooden stake, and snapping out of it, she wakes up screaming back at the dining room table. But little does she know that the nightmare is just getting started. Okay, I think it might be time for the Warrens here to find a new line of work. But with that being said, if they're going to investigate a house where there could be an evil demonic entity on the loose, then it's a huge mistake if they don't do everything possible to protect themselves. Now, when Lorraine enters these deep states of concentration, she's using a technique known as astral projection, where her soul actually leaves her body to walk in the spirit world, allowing her to see things that are beyond normal human perception. Scientifically, it's known as an out-of-body experience, or OBE. These experiences actually produce similar brainwaves to REM sleep, which is the stage of sleep where most of the vivid dreaming occurs. And the body even paralyzes itself to prevent you from acting the dreams out. Now, during this time, sometimes even a loud sound or physically jostling a person won't be enough to wake them up, so if they're going to keep using this strategy for their investigations, then they need a more effective way to pull her out before the vision goes too far. So like first things first, they should establish a firm time limit that they both agree on, so if she's not out within, say, 5 minutes, he'll start doing everything he can to wake her up. But since shaking her awake won't cut it, he needs a way to break through the arousal threshold. This can be done by placing a damp, cold rag against her forehead, shocking her awake with the sudden temperature change. And for extra insurance, I'd even splash it with some holy water first, you know? Otherwise, a sharp sensory contrast like a loud clap near her ear could do the trick, or even holding a lit match up to her nose to trigger an involuntary survival response. Now, in real-world psychic journeys, experts use what's known as an anchor, aka a predetermined signal to bring them back. This can be a verbal trigger phrase using her full name like Lorraine Warren, wake up, that they practiced consistently during training, or she can use a grounding object like a wedding ring, a rosary necklace, you know, that she holds on to while she's in the trance, which Ed can take out of her hands to remind her that it's time to come back. By stopping her investigations, Lorraine would be giving the demon exactly what it wants, so instead she needs to tell her husband everything that happened so he can help her process it and work on their strategy so that they'll be even more prepared during the next encounter. You feel me? The story then picks up 1 year later at a rundown home in the suburbs of Enfield, England, where single mother Peggy Hodson is struggling to pay the bills and keep up with her 4 young kids. At night, the oldest girl, Margaret, finds her sister Janet messing around with a spirit board that she made with her friends at school. Curious, they try communicating with any spirits that might be nearby, but it seems like the board does not work, and frustrated, the girl puts it away before going to bed. Hours later, everyone's asleep when Janet starts rolling around in bed, and the next thing that she knows, she wakes up in the middle of the living room floor. Absolutely confused, she hears what sounds like footsteps coming from upstairs, and her sister Margaret wakes up to the sound of someone banging on the bedroom door. Noticing that her sister is out of bed, the girl gets up and goes to let her in, only to find that the hallway is completely empty. But that's when Janet shows up a minute later and they both go back to bed without thinking way too much of it. Sometime late the next night, the youngest boy, Billy, is getting himself a drink from the kitchen when he notices the swing set blowing in the breeze. There's something so strange about it, almost like it's calling out to him, but he snaps out of it and goes back to bed. Meanwhile, Janet starts talking in her sleep as if she's having a nightmare, but just when her sister thinks that it's all over, the girl sits straight up and starts speaking in a different voice, insisting that this is her house. Alarmed, Margaret goes over and tucks the girl back in, but then a moment later, she's startled awake when her sister appears standing right next to her bed, and it looks like she's talking to someone in the corner of the room. Turning on the lamp, she's relieved to see that nobody's there, and her sister goes back to bed without saying another word, but Margaret is so freaked out that she decides to keep the light on for the rest of the night. On his way back up the steps, her brother stubs his toe on a toy fire truck and pushes it into a teepee at the end of the hall. But just as he's climbing back into bed, the same truck comes rolling towards his door from out of the darkness. Nervous, he picks it up and brings it back to the tent, but when he pushes it inside, a man's voice screams in pain, and terrified, he immediately runs to get his mom, insisting that there's somebody in the house. Worried, Peggy gets up and goes to check it out for herself, only to find out that the teepee is completely empty. But just when it's starting to look like it was all in his imagination, that's when they hear something moving around downstairs. Telling her son to go to his room, she nervously inches down the staircase and makes her way into the living room, where she finds Janet sitting in the old rocking chair. It seems like the girl was just sleepwalking, and Peggy brings her back upstairs to her own bed, but nothing could ever prepare them for just how terrifying things are about to get. Alright, this family's got some problems, and I'm not just talking about paying the bills. Although their mother hasn't realized it yet, these kids are showing all the warning signs of a demonic possession. And with the way that things are going, it looks like they don't have long before it gets dangerous. Now, when you look at what's been going on in the kids' lives lately, it's easy to see why they're in such a vulnerable mental state. With their father recently leaving to start a new family, this destabilized the household, leaving their mother overwhelmed and unable to give the kids any emotional support. And on top of that, they're constantly bullied by the other kids at school, so no matter where they go, they're surrounded by chronic stressors with no end in sight. This means they can't tell the difference between paranormal activity and real psychological symptoms, because they both mirror each other so closely, like how the noises could be explained as hallucinations caused by anxiety and a lack of sleep. Then we have Janet here speaking in voices and sleepwalking around the house, which are both signs of demonic activity, but also well-documented sleep disorders triggered by stress and emotional trauma. Now, even though they don't know exactly what they're dealing with yet, reducing the kids' stress will do more than just help with these symptoms. They'll actually be starving the demon of the negative energy that it needs to become more powerful, so here's what I think they should do next. In chaotic environments, predictability equals safety, so the first thing they should do is establish set meal times, bedtimes, and morning routines. Even if the house is run down, keeping that sense of order helps the kids feel like they're still in control of their lives, breaking them out of the constant fight-or-flight loop that they've been stuck in. Also, instead of writing the disturbances off as just their imagination, Peggy needs to let the kids fully express themselves and actually listen to what they have to say. That way they won't feel so isolated or like they need to internalize their fears. After that, the next step is to strengthen the group bond by finding something they can all do as a family. It's not like they have the cash for a trip to Disney World, but they can still make time at least once a week for a fun family activity, even if it's just playing cards or gathering around to read a story. Now, even with all of the logical explanations out of the way, there's no really denying that something weird is going on here, but starting with factors that they can control will help them fight back even before they've realized just how bad things really are. The very next day, Janet stays homesick from school watching some TV while everyone else is out of the house. It seems like any other day until strangely the TV begins switching channels without her touching the remote. Switching it back, it only lasts a minute before the station changes again. Only this time when she's looking for the remote, it's completely disappeared into thin air. Just then she hears the phone ringing in the kitchen and is relieved to hear that it's just her mother calling to see how she's doing. But when she looks around the corner, she finds the remote sitting right in the middle of the old rocking chair. Nervous, the girl sits back down on the couch when suddenly there's a loud crash of thunder outside and the TV loses its signal. Frustrated, she gets up to mess with the antenna, but when the static clears, she sees a vision of an old man sitting in the rocking chair, only for him to disappear again as soon as she turns around. As she backs away terrified, the old man suddenly appears right behind her, shouting, "This is my house," only to vanish as the girl falls down screaming for help. That night, Janet ties herself to the bed with a jump rope to see if it'll stop her from sleepwalking. Sure enough, she wakes up a few hours later as she face plants into the floor, and it looks like her idea kinda worked. That's when she hears someone banging on the bedroom door. Frightened, she looks up at her sister, who's still sound asleep in bed, and decides to see what's out there, believing that it's just her mother or one of the boys. The lights don't seem to work, so Janet has to grab a flashlight as she nervously goes into the hallway, carefully making her way down the stairs until she can see the living room. Suddenly, the chair starts rocking all on its own, and horrified, she immediately sprints back to her bedroom and shuts the door. But when she looks back, the door is wide open, and she can hear something coming towards them down the hall. That's when an invisible force rips off the sheets as both girls' beds start shaking like they're in the middle of an earthquake. And hearing them scream, their mother rushes out of bed to find them both already at her door. Pulling back her collar, Janet reveals a fresh bite mark on her shoulder, swearing that there's somebody in her room. But when the woman goes to check it out, she finds the room completely empty. Finding the spirit board hidden underneath the bed, she's just about to blame it on the girl's imagination when the dresser slams straight against the door. And realizing that they're telling the truth, the entire family grabs their things and rushes over to the neighbor's crib, unable to believe what they've just seen. The police arrive shortly after the incident and begin searching the house for any signs of the intruder, but now that the attacks have stopped, the evidence makes it look like the family are the ones playing the trick. Just when it seems like they won't find anything, they hear something moving inside the walls, and the chair that the officer was standing on suddenly slides all the way back into the kitchen without a single person touching it. At a loss, the officers say that the best they can do is file a report, but one of them says that she's friends with a priest and offers to have him call the mother first thing in the morning. Okay, well, that sure didn't take very long. Now on the bright side, at least now their mom is fully on the same page, but now the question is, what the hell are they going to do? Well, let's start with the positives first. Leaving the house right away was actually a pretty great idea. Most people wait around until it's actually too late before the thought of leaving ever crosses their mind, so it's nice to see a family with some actual survival instincts for once. But going to the neighbor's house doesn't just get them away from the source of the problem, it even gives them 2 more meat shields for the demon to focus on. And that's better than nothing at the very least. Other than that, filing a police report and contacting a priest are both very good ideas. Even though they can't do much about it, having 2 police officers' sworn accounts of the incident helps back up their story, and they're going to need as much proof as they can get if they want the church to get involved. Now, they may not be trained exorcists themselves, but that doesn't mean there's nothing they can do while they wait for reinforcements to arrive. Now that they know that Janet was telling the truth, they need to start taking everything that happened to her seriously and see if there are any patterns that they can pick up on. For example, the ghost constantly repeats the phrase, "This is my house," showing an obsessive attachment to the property and especially the family's living room. Based on this, we can safely assume that he used to live there and probably even died in the house before they moved in. Since he actively commutes and interacts with objects like the TV remote, we can classify this as intelligent haunting, meaning that he's fully aware that a new family has moved into the house, and he's obviously not very happy about it. But knowing how to classify it gives us options for what to do next, for sure. The first step is to trace the haunting back to its source, which seems to be the rocking chair in the living room. This chair is most likely a trigger object that's keeping the spirit tied to the house, so if it were me, the first thing that I would do is just get rid of it. But they need to be careful not to make the situation any worse. Before moving it, I'd wrap it in a white sheet, place a cross or rosary on it, and say a protective prayer to weaken the spirit's grip. Then once they've gotten rid of the chair, it's time to officially cleanse the space. For this part, I'd open all the windows to let as much fresh air in and sunlight as possible, physically clean the room from top to bottom, rearrange the furniture to establish that this is their house now, not his, and finally, burn some cleansing herbs, or light a candle if they can find any to officially purify the space. You know, they might not be expert ghost hunters like the Warrens, but taking these simple steps, the family should be able to buy some time until someone more qualified comes along to finish the job. Back across the pond, Lorraine is at home with her daughter Judy when she finds the girl staring at something in the hallway. Looking up, she's met with the horrifying vision of a demonic nun staring back at them, watching as it silently turns and disappears into the office. Telling her daughter to stay back, she carefully follows the spirit inside, where she finds the painting that her husband has been working on staring at her from the shadows. Just then, the tape player on the other side of the room starts playing music, and when she goes to shut it off, the lamp next to the painting mysteriously goes out. Worried, she inches closer and closer, expecting something to happen at any second. Only when she turns the light back on, it's still a harmless painting just like before. But when she goes to the door, everything suddenly slams shut, trapping her inside. That's when a shadow appears on the wall in front of her, gliding across the room until it reaches the painting, and all of a sudden it charges at her with a mouth full of bloody teeth, causing her to stumble backwards into a pile of boxes. Getting back to her feet, Lorraine finds that she's been transported back to Amityville basement, where the demon shows her another vision of her husband meeting his death, and snapping out of it, she wakes back up in her own library, horrified at the thought of what the visions could mean. Back in Enfield, Peggy is just getting home from work when she's approached by a journalist who says that he wants to do a story about the strange events that have been happening to her family. The woman hesitates at first, but he explains that the extra attention could get them some real help, and realizing that he might be right, she reluctantly agrees to let them inside. After getting interviews with the police and bringing in a few experts for their opinions, the reporter decides that he wants to hear from the girls themselves, but that's when everything changes. Calling out for the spirits to show themselves, they notice Janet starting to fidget around in her seat, and the power surges as she begins speaking to them in a bizarre demonic voice. Strangely, the girl insists that her name isn't Janet, explaining that somebody named Bill Wilkins is controlling her now. He says that he's the previous owner who died in the rocking chair before they moved in, and now he likes tormenting them just to watch the family suffer. Finally, the girl snaps out of it, but it looks like the reporter got what he wanted, and now all they can do is wait to see if help ever really comes. Okie dokie. It looks like this reporter here just got the interview of a lifetime, but the family still needs to be careful. Like we mentioned before, the family is going to need proof before the church is willing to send any support. And with their current financial situation, they could never afford things like cameras and recording equipment. But now that the reporters are involved, they're able to use technology that they otherwise wouldn't have access to, and everything they record becomes valuable evidence in their case. Plus, more eyes on the story means more people who'd want to help, or at least that's what you'd think, but now for the bad side. You see, too much attention will turn the haunting into a spectacle, and the family will go from victims to characters in a media circus. If the church gets any indication they're just doing this for attention, they'll pull all of their support right away, and increased criticism from the public could lead Janet and the family feeling exploited for content, making them even more traumatized, and giving the demon exactly what it wants. Now, since they're too broke to do anything on their own, it looks like accepting the reporter's help is still the best choice. But with that being said, they need to make one major change to their approach. The problem is, they're not just observing the events, they're actively provoking the spirit. And it's the same mistake that the girls made on the night of the very first attack. When it comes to dealing with spirits, every word matters, and asking if there are any spirits around that want to communicate is basically like opening the door and inviting the demons to come on in. Specifying your intent and boundaries is part of Spirit Communication 101, and it just goes to show that the so-called experts here actually got no idea what the hell they even doing. By constantly acknowledging and provoking the spirit, they're only giving it more attention and energy, which is why the attacks have gotten worse since the reporters showed up. If it were me, I'd explain to these goofy goobers that they were only there to observe what happened, not provoke it, question it, or do anything to encourage more demonic behavior. They can stick around and get their footage to help the family build their case, but from now on, we're not taking any more attempts to communicate with the spirit, only capturing what we can on camera and audio recording and letting the evidence speak for itself. This would be the safest approach to take while still benefiting as much as possible from the reporter's presence, allowing them to keep documenting the incidents without making it any worse until the real experts finally show up. Instead of spending the night at their place, the neighbors invite the family to set up shop at their house across the street. But just because they've left doesn't mean that they're safe. That night, Billy wakes up to the sound of a bell ringing somewhere in the house. Thinking that it's their dog asking them to go out, he gets up and opens the door to the backyard. When suddenly, the dog transforms into a terrifying demonic creature that calls itself the Crooked Man and begins chasing him through the house as he races back to the others. Turning on the lights, the neighbors rush downstairs to see what's wrong, only to find his sister Janet repeating the nursery rhyme in a demonic voice. All of a sudden, Janet roars as the metal fireplace cover launches across the room, falling over a moment later as she begins foaming at the mouth, and her mother desperately screams for help as she cradles the injured girl in her arms. As word of the haunting reaches the church, a priest arrives to ask Ed and Lorraine for their help with the case. Lorraine hesitates at first, telling her husband about the visions that she's been having ever since the last job, but he insists that the family needs their help, promising to get out of there before anything becomes too dangerous. When they arrive at the house, Lorraine can already tell that something about the place is not right, but she keeps it to herself and follows the others inside. Giving them a tour, Peggy leads them up to the girls' room, showing Ed how they've chained it shut and placed crosses all over the walls. But it doesn't seem to be working because they still hear the demon throwing furniture around in there every night. After taking a good look around, they explain that they'll have to get some real proof if the church is going to get involved. To do this, they decide to have Janet sit in the old man's chair while holding water in her mouth, filming it to show that she's not making the voice on her own. As the adults sit there waiting for something to happen, the girl spits the water back into the cup, saying that the demon won't speak if they're all watching her. Playing along, they turn their backs as the girl takes another sip, but this time the power surges again as she finally begins speaking to them in the old man's voice. Confronting him, Ed argues that the ghost should just leave the house and move on, but when that doesn't work, he pulls out his cross necklace and holds it up to the spirit's face. All of a sudden, the demon roars as the spirit of the old man tries getting out a message, repeating, "Help, let go," before finally giving control back to Janet. And the girl spits her water into the cup, proving that she hadn't been speaking the entire time. Okay, now we're finally getting somewhere, but just because the Warrens are here doesn't mean that the family is safe. If anything, these cases always seem to get worse before they get better, so they need to make sure that they actually survive long enough for any of this to matter. Now, what just happened back at the neighbor's place is proof that the spirit isn't just limited to the house. It's latched onto the kids and will follow them wherever they go. So if running away won't work, then it seems like their only choice is to demon-proof their lives as much as possible before the next attack. Like, let's start with what we've already tried here. Chaining the girl's bedroom door shut, yeah, and treating the place like it might be a quarantine zone for sure. This might seem like a good idea on paper, but when you really think about it, physical barriers can't do much to stop a non-physical threat. And by doing this, they've actually signaled that they're afraid, which is giving the demon exactly what it wants. What they actually need to do is remove every door in the house and switch to using spiritual barriers instead. Once all the doors are down, Ed and Lorraine should mark every threshold in the house with a cross drawn in chalk, leave a line of salt and sprinkle holy water at each doorway, refreshing the barrier several times a day, and tape prayers written on paper to every doorframe. As for the family, they should all sleep in the same room and arm each kid with a religious item like a cross. Then during their downtime, the Warrens should teach Peggy here as much as possible about banishing evil spirits. That way she can still fight back even if they're not around, and that should be enough to keep them safe until they can figure out how to get rid of the spirit for good. Sometime in the middle of the night, Janet disappears from her mother's bed and wakes up pinned to the living room ceiling. Looking around, she's terrified to see a vision of the old man sitting in the rocking chair, but there's nothing she can do as he gets up and starts making his way up the stairs. Suddenly, the spirit pulls her straight through the floor, dragging her back up into the destroyed bedroom. Horrified, she watches as every cross on the wall slowly rotates until they're all upside down, and suddenly the old man lunges out of the shadows. Hearing the girl's screams, her mother wakes up and rushes to help, but the door is still chained shut, leaving her with no way to get inside. As she looks through the opening, she sees the old man dragging her daughter back into the shadows, but they're finally able to find the key and manage to save the girl just in time. The following day, Ed and Lorraine meet with the other experts to discuss the evidence. After everything that's happened, they're fully convinced that the stories are true, but they'll still need more proof if they're going to convince the church. They can't make any progress yet, but in the meantime, their plan is to help the Hodginsons relax just a little bit, hoping to lift their spirits so they'll still be strong enough to fight back. After taking the kids out shopping, Lorraine explains that the spirit is like a bully, so they need to stick together to watch each other's backs. Unfortunately, their record player isn't working anymore, but Ed picks up an old guitar and shows the kids how to fight the demon with the power of music and friendship. While they're killing time as they wait for another burst of paranormal activity, Ed keeps himself busy by helping out with some repairs around the house. Peggy leads him down to the flooded basement where he spots a leaky pipe at the far side of the room, and wading into the murky water, he starts carefully making his way over to fix it up. As he's working, he gets so distracted that he doesn't notice a shadowy figure rising out of the water behind him, and it quietly sneaks up behind his back until it's standing just a few inches away, and all of a sudden the spirit appears in the water near Peggy's feet, grabbing onto her wrist as it starts trying to drag her underwater. Rushing to help her, Ed manages to pull her away as the spirit disappears, and when they look at her arm, they realize that she has a fresh bite wound just like her daughter. Then they notice something as it plops into the water behind them, and digging around, Ed pulls up a pair of fake teeth. Holding them up to her arm, they realize that it matches up perfectly with the bite mark, proving that the old man's spirit is really attacking them after all. Alright, it looks like the Warrens might have bit off a little more than they can chew here. It's only been one night since the two of them showed up, but the demon is already taking things further than it's ever gone before, so unless they want to get everybody killed, now might be a good time to adjust their strat a little bit. First, let's start with what they're doing that works. It might seem silly to think that Ed's Elvis performance did anything to help the situation, but as goofy as it was, the psychology behind it was solid. Just like we touched on earlier, demons feed on fear, and every attack keeps the family in survival mode, flooding their body with stress hormones like cortisol and adrenaline, and making them more susceptible to demonic influence. But by taking them shopping and making the kids feel normal for a day, they're activating the exact opposite parts of their brain and making it that much harder for the demon to take control. Now, this spirit isn't just lingering around the house, it's mocking holy objects, targeting the most vulnerable kids, and straight up attacking anyone who gets in its way. So by now, they should have more than enough evidence to show that it's not just the old man that's haunting them, but it's an even more powerful demonic entity. With that being said, they need to start watching for any signs that the possession is getting worse, checking Janet and the other kids multiple times a day for any changes in behavior, memory loss, or physical reactions to sacred objects like crosses. Now, if it gets so bad that an exorcism looks like the only option, then the best place that they can possibly be is a church. But the Warrens should have learned from their case back in Rhode Island, remember, that the target won't be able to leave the property once the possession is fully taken over. So now that the attacks are escalating, they should reach out to the priest who contacted them and request to have the family temporarily moved onto church grounds, giving them a safe place to stay while the Warrens continue their investigation. Meanwhile, back upstairs, the kids are busy decorating the Christmas tree when Janet notices something watching them from the kitchen. Realizing that the girl's in trouble, her siblings come to see what's wrong, and fed up, her little brother Johnny here decides that it's time to take matters into his own hands. Determined to confront the spirit for himself, the kid walks into the kitchen and finds every knife that the family owns sticking out of the table. Just then, he hears a scream from the other room, turning around to find that his sister has completely vanished, until suddenly she appears in the kitchen right next to him with a knife clutched in her hand. Hearing the commotion, Ed and Lorraine come rushing back into the house, but the demon slams the kitchen door shut before they can get inside. Ed finally manages to get through, and they're relieved to see that Johnny survived by hiding in the closet, but there's no sign of Janet anywhere in sight. That's when their assistant puts on his headset, leading them to a panel in the wall, and pulling it open, they're shocked to find the girl hiding inside. Taking out his cross necklace, Ed holds it up as the spirit of the old man starts gasping out another message, repeating the words, "Me won't me," until he finally lets go and pulls the girl to safety. She begins to cry as the possession finally wears off. After the attack, they're all gathered around wondering what to do next when the skeptic comes in with some shocking news. She claims that it's been a hoax all along, and the tapes that they've just recorded finally caught Janet in a big fat lie. Sure enough, they watch the recordings and see the girl throwing objects all over the room, making it seem like she caused all the damage herself. I mean, it's the first real evidence that they've got, although it's not exactly what they were hoping for, and defeated, they have to go back inside to tell Peggy the bad news. The mother is absolutely furious when she hears what they have to say, but Ed explains that the church won't send help after seeing what they've just caught on tape. Heartbroken, she orders them all to get out of the house, but as the Warrens drive away, they see Janet sadly staring through the window as if her last hope of salvation is going with them. Later that night, the other kids come to ask Janet if she really faked the attack in the kitchen. To their surprise, she admits that she did, but only because the demon said that it would kill them all if she didn't get the investigators out of the house. Meanwhile, the Warrens are boarding a train when Ed accidentally drops the tapes, and seeing the two reels overlapping gives him a game-changing idea. Firing up his tape player, they realize that the old man's spirit was trying to send them a message, saying, "Help me, it won't let me go." Lorraine becomes overcome with a powerful vision of the old man sitting in his favorite chair. Approaching him, she listens as the man explains that he wants to leave the family alone, but can't, because the demonic force that's controlling him is still after the little girl. Just then, the demonic nun appears behind his shoulder, and Lorraine suddenly snaps out of the vision, realizing that the old man is actually just another victim, and the demonic spirit is only using him as a way to attack the family. This means that Janet was telling the truth all along, and now it's only a matter of time before the demon strikes again. Okay, well, I guess the experts finally cracked the case. Maybe Lorraine was right, and they should have just stayed back in Connecticut after all, because right now it looks like these two just up. Like, sure, the video footage shows the girl throwing stuff around by hand, but just because she wasn't using telekinesis doesn't mean we can just ignore everything else that happened here. Like, what 11-year-old child that you know possesses the upper body strength required to throw a chair across the room so hard that it shatters when it hits the wall? Gohan from Dragon Ball Z, maybe? Yeah. Not to mention that she looks like she's one step away from turning into Reagan from The Exorcist. And how the hell was she even left alone in the first place when there were so many adults in the house? Somebody should have been keeping an eye on her at all times, especially after she was just attacked by a demonic senior citizen the night before. They called you up because you were supposed to be the demon experts, and yet it took you this long to figure out that it wasn't just a regular ghost? This is like calling the exterminator only to have them dump a box full of wasps in the house and cut the phone lines on the way out. And even after all that, you turn around and leave the family high and dry just to decide you're coming back to be the heroes after all at the last possible minute. Well, thanks for nothing, Ed and Lorraine, because you two just f***ed up. Back at the house, Peggy is still trying to clean up the disaster in the kitchen when she hears a scream from the next room, and running to see what's wrong, she finds both her daughters levitating in midair several feet above the ground. Terrified, Margaret screams for help as her sister laughs at them in a demonic voice, and picking the girl up, her mother rushes the kids outside and tells them to run for the neighbors, but when she turns to go back inside, she realizes that she's already been locked out. The Warrens arrive at the house a few moments later, but no matter how hard they try, they can't get through the front door. Smashing out a window, Ed pushes away the glass and starts trying to climb inside, but before he can get very far, the demon blocks the path with a bunch of furniture, forcing him to find another way inside. Desperate to save the girl in time, he takes off running towards the basement door, ignoring Lorraine as she begs him to come back. Worried that her vision is about to come true, she chases him into the backyard and down the steps, but before she can get inside, the demon slams the door and locks her out. Terrified, she begs him to wait while they find a way to get it open, but Ed knows that there's no time to waste and sets off to rescue the girl before it's too late. Hearing her screaming from somewhere upstairs, he grabs a pipe and starts smashing his way through the loose floorboards, creating a hole that's big enough to pull himself up into the house. As he's getting to his feet, a valve suddenly twists off a pipe, releasing a burst of steam directly in his eyes. Meanwhile, back outside, Lorraine starts trying to think of the demon's name, knowing that it's the only way to actually defeat it, and that's when she realizes that she's already known its name all along. Remembering back to her vision in Connecticut, she realizes that she carved the demon's name into the pages of her Bible, and rushing back to grab it from the car, she discovers that the spirit they're up against is known as Valak. A lightning bolt strikes the tree in front of the house, turning it into a giant wooden spike, and seeing this, she begins to panic, thinking that her worst fears are about to come true. Returning with her Bible, Lorraine gets inside thanks to a neighbor making a hole in the basement door, while upstairs, her husband finds the girl silently standing in her old bedroom. Throwing back her arms, the glass shatters as Janet climbs onto the windowsill, but Ed grabs her at the last second, holding on for dear life as they both dangle over the broken tree. Lorraine enters the room only to find the demonic nun blocking her path and pins it up against the wall before she can make it to the others. Just when it looks like they're done for, she pulls out the only weapon that they have left, calling the demon by its real name, and suddenly the creature is torn apart in a swirling whirlwind of darkness as it's defeated once and for all. She grabs her husband's arm just as they're about to fall, saving both of their lives at the last possible moment. and the girl's mother rushes into the room, relieved to see that her daughter is still alive. When the paramedics arrive to check everybody out, Ed thanks his wife for getting him out of another jam, and the family comes to thank them again for all of their help. Taking off his necklace, he gives it to Janet so she'll always have something to keep her safe. And for now, it looks like the family can go back to their normal lives. Till one day many years later when the mother Peggy died while sitting in the exact same place where they kept the old rocking chair. So if there's one lesson that we can all learn here, it's that you should always have your house inspected for demons before you decide to move in. Conjuring 2, The Conjureverse. Man, pretty solid entry if you ask me. When Ed did the Elvis thing, I done fell out my chair only to be scared 5 minutes later in the exact same way. I gotta say, man, The Conjuring, it just, it continues to find new ways to scare us, and because this episode was so long, I'm sure we skipped over a few things that you guys could have done in order to beat the movie as well, so you guys have to let me know what they are down in the comments below. Thank you so much for watching. Leave a like and subscribe. Check out that How to Beat playlist for more videos just like this one. I'm the guy. We'll see you in the next video, and have a damn good day.